We're going to go ahead and create a new project. We'll just go ahead and use the empty project. Now this one we're going to have just be the layout size is the same size as the screen. So we'll go ahead and click on the actual layout, and we'll go ahead and change this to 854 by 480. And that's the same size as the default window size. So you see it's a perfect size. They both match up. Then what we'll do is we'll add a background. And now this background we can add as a sprite. It's the exact same size as our background, or it's actually just a little bit larger, so it overlaps. But it's not too large. So there you have it. We can actually stretch it just a little tiny bit. And this will actually cover the entire background. It's just kind of a nice little background for our presence. We'll go ahead and just rename this background. And now we'll add a particles, and the particles will get used when our presence gets sliced with the mouse, and it'll just cause an explosion. So we'll go ahead and load in this kind of cloud, and that'll be what our particles is that spawns when the presence get cut. We'll make that a little bit smaller. Now we do want to change this to single shot, otherwise it goes over and over again. And then we'll also adjust the spray cone to 360. So it'll be in the full 360 degrees of our box. That way it'll go kind of in all directions. If you just want it to go up, you could just set that to go in the up direction. In this game, we're going to keep track of how many boxes we explode. So we'll need a text field, and we're just going to go ahead and place that in this top left-hand corner. We'll go ahead and change the color so that it's white. And we'll also adjust the font size so that it's a little bit larger. And when you make it larger and it doesn't fit, you'll see the text actually disappears. So we just need to make this box a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to set the horizontal alignment to right. Then I'm going to tweak this just a little bit. I'm going to set this value to 0. And we'll talk about this here in a minute when we update that. But we need to make sure that we actually set that to 0 at the beginning of the game. Because when we increment it, we're just going to add 1, and so it needs to actually be a number. The next thing we're going to add is we're going to add our presence. So we'll go ahead and create a sprite, and we'll place it off the screen here. Now this one, I've got a number of different animation frames, and so we're going to randomly select one of those animation frames. So let's go ahead and import from File. And we're going to go ahead and hold down the Shift key. We're going to click the first present. We'll hold down the Shift key and we'll click the last one. So that'll select all 21 of them at the same time. Again, that's the Shift key, and click the first and the last. Then I'm going to click Open, and you'll see it loads all of them in their animation frames down here at the bottom. Now the first one, it always leaves the one that you have open. So our first one is actually blank. So let's go ahead and delete that. Now we have 21, 0 through 20. And each present is the same size, but you can see they're just a little different in design and pattern. And the shape, I think the shape is actually all the same on each of them. Some of them might be just a little bit wider. Now it's important that we don't allow these to rotate through the animation frame. So to do that, we're going to click on the animation, which is default. And right here in the properties, we're going to set speed to 0. Now by setting it to 0, we'll say don't cycle through the animation frame. Now if we forget that, what will happen is as soon as the present gets spawned, it'll immediately start rotating through each of those animation frames one time. So you'll see all of a sudden your present will change real quick. And then it will end on this last frame. So all of them will cycle through, and then they'll all look like this. That's all we need to do to import our present. So we'll go ahead and close this. Now we want to add behaviors to our present, and we're going to use the physics behavior, and that's going to allow our presents to kind of fly up and then slowly fall again. So they'll have this physics motion to them. So let's go ahead and locate and add physics. All right, so now we have all of our sprites and pieces. Let's rename a few of these. So let's name our present. Let's name our particles. We can leave that called particles. And let's rename this to score. All right, so now on the event sheet, we're going to add a couple of events. So the first event we're going to create is we're going to say system, and we're going to use this option that says every X seconds. And we're going to change this so that it doesn't happen every 1 second. We're actually going to use a function called random. And random is going to take a range, so we can give it a small number and a large number, and it will pick a number in between those ranges just at random. We're going to use 0.5, which is half of a second, and 2. So this will allow us to spawn a new present at a random interval between half of a second and 2 seconds. Our action for when this happens, we're going to actually go ahead and create a new present. So we're going to use the system, and then we're going to call the one that says create object, and we're going to create that present. And we're going to go ahead and leave it on layer 0 because that's the only layer that we have. Now the x-axis goes across the bottom, left and right, and the y-axis goes up and down. And 0, 0 is the top left-hand corner. So if we want to go ahead and spawn our present in the lower left-hand corner, we're going to leave 0 for the x, and then we're going to go ahead and create the y-axis, which is the height of our layout, and that is 480. So this is going to create an object in the lower left-hand corner, and the way it'll spawn is it'll actually be right in the corner itself. So the present will, the center of the present will be in that corner. So now that present is going to get spawned right in that lower corner, and because it has physics, it's just going to fall. So we don't want it to fall. We want to actually apply a force to our present so that it goes up across the screen. Now to do that, we're going to use the present, and then we're going to use, in the physics, we're going to say apply impulse at angle, and we're going to apply it at an angle to go up. So we'll go ahead and click next. The impulse, we're going to actually vary the impulse a little bit because we don't want them all to be going exactly the same. Otherwise, they'll follow this exact same trajectile. So we're going to use this random again. We're going to say random 25, 45. So this will give us a random amount of impulse between 25 and 45. And the angle is actually going to be -70. And the reason for that is 0 is this direction, horizontal, and it goes this direction. So we're just going to say go -70. So it'll be at an angle pointing up a little bit from that left-hand corner. And we can go ahead and leave the image point at 0. So let's go ahead and test this, and we'll see if that works. All right, so you see that first present just fell. That present was the one that was off the screen at the top. We'll fix that here in just a minute, but you can see presents are being launched from the lower left-hand corner, and some of them are going way up and then taking a second or two before they come down, and others are just barely getting up over, and that's because we're applying that force between 25 and 45. So each of them are a little bit different. Now you'll also see all of the presents are exactly the same. That's because we haven't changed the frame, animation frame on those just yet either. So let's go ahead and add a couple of those additional things. All right, so now let's go ahead and change it so that each time a new present is created, it actually has a different animation frame. So we'll go ahead and add another action, and we're going to say present, and we're going to say set frame. And we're going to actually use that random function again, and we're going to use the value 0, 21. So now this is going to pick a random number between 0 and 21, and then that'll be the one that it actually uses as part of that frame. So let's go ahead and test that and see if we have different presents each time. All right, so that looks good. So now we've got different presents being launched. And if we watch through all of them, we could see all of the different presents. But now you can see different presents are being launched. So let's go ahead and add a couple additional features. So the next thing we want to do is we want to do this again, but we want our presents to be launched from the lower right-hand corner. So let's go ahead and copy this one. So we're just going to go ahead and say right-click, and we're going to say copy. And then we're going to right-click, and we're going to say paste. So now we have two of them that are identical. And the only thing that we need to change on this is where the present actually gets spawned and then the angle in which the present gets launched. So we'll go ahead and change that right here. Now, because 0, 480 is in that lower left-hand corner, 854 as our X and 480 as our Y will be the lower right-hand corner. So let's change this to 854. And now that angle is going to be pointing in the wrong direction now because it's going to go off of the screen. So let's go ahead and change that, and we're going to use an angle of negative 110. And now that's going to point them up in this direction, going across the screen from the right to the left. Now let's go ahead and make one more change. If you remember, that first present that we created ends up falling down the screen. Now a real easy fix to this is we're going to just simply move our objects to the bottom here. Now that means our present's going to fall forever and ever and ever. But we're going to fix that as well. But this will prevent it from falling from the top. So we'll just set them down here at the bottom. Now this one, our particles, I'm going to lay a little bit lower just because it tends to show up at the beginning of the game and get on our screen. So as long as we have it down far enough that the particles don't spawn onto our screen, we won't see it. Now we're going to add the feature to swipe the mouse across a present and essentially cut it or cause it to explode. So the first thing we need to do is we need to actually add the mouse. So we'll say insert new object. We'll scroll down, we'll add mouse. So now let's go to the event sheet and add the events. For this one, what we're going to use is we're going to use mouse, and we're going to say is cursor over object. And then we're going to pick our object, and that object is going to be our present. Then we'll click done. Now for this one, we want to add a second event. So we're going to right click, and we're going to say add, and we're going to say add another condition. So this means both conditions must be true. So our second condition is going to say mouse, and then we're going to use is button down. And we're going to use the left mouse button. So this is going to mean if our mouse button is down and the cursor of the mouse is over present, we want to do an action. So this will mean the user has pressed the mouse and essentially drags the mouse across the screen over a present. All right, so our action here is we're going to go ahead and spawn the particles. So we're going to say present. We're going to use spawn another object. We're going to spawn the particles. And we can go ahead and leave the layer and the image point the same. So we're going to click done. And now we're going to go ahead and destroy the present. So we'll go ahead and say present destroy. And now our present will disappear. So let's go ahead and run this and see if we have presents spawning from both the left and the right, and if we can destroy them. All right, so here comes our presents, both from the left and the right. So let's drag it across. All right, so that looks pretty good. So we can essentially slice our presents. Now you'll see some of them, if the physics work out just right where they hit each other, you'll see that they bounce around. Now we can adjust some of those physics properties to give them a little bit more elasticity, to bounce a little bit more if we want. And that might cause them to springboard and really project off of each other. So now one problem that we have is these presents continue to fall. So even when they're off the screen, they're going to continue to fall. Now the ones that we swipe are going to be destroyed, but we need to make sure that we catch those that fall and destroy those as well. Otherwise, we're going to potentially crash the browser if it runs for too long. So to do that, we're going to create an event, and we're going to say present, and we're going to use this feature called compare y. And we're going to just check to see if the y value of the present is greater than our screen, which is 480, then we just want to destroy it. So let's go ahead and say is greater than, and we don't want to use exactly 480 because that's when the center crosses the 480. So we're just going to pick a bigger number than 480, so let's say 500. Now our action is just simply going to be to destroy the present. So present destroy. So now when the presents fall below the y-axis of 400 or 500, they're going to get destroyed. So that isn't going to change anything on our game, but it's just going to prevent them from collecting. Okay, so everything is looking pretty good. We can now destroy presents, and we don't have them collecting up at the bottom. Let's adjust a couple of those physics properties. So we're going to go ahead and select our present. Let's go ahead and make our elasticity a little bit more bouncy. So it's by default is 0.2, so let's make this 0.8, and then let's see how that works. All right, so we'll see if these presents hit each other and see what happens. So there we go. So now they're a little bit more springy if they hit each other and collide. We don't have a lot of good examples here. Okay, so now let's go ahead and keep track of how many presents we destroy. So we're going to use a little bit of a trick. rather than using a variable and keeping track of it that way. All we're going to do is we're going to take the value that's currently in the score, we're going to convert it to an integer, add 1 to it, and set it back. So the way we do that is right here where we destroy our present, we're going to go ahead and say score, and we're going to use this setText method, which is going to set the text back, and we're going to use this function called int, which stands for integer, which converts a string to a number, and that string right now is the string 0 because that's what we typed it in. And we're going to say score.text. So that's going to get that 0. Now if the score is 100, then it's going to get the number 100. And we're going to add 1 to it. So whatever it was, we're going to add 1 to it and set it back. So it's a little bit of a trick, but it's just one line of code, and it saves us from creating a global variable and doing the updating of the text. So that's how we're going to keep track of our score. We'll click done. So now let's test that. All right, so let's slice a present. You'll see it's keeping track of them, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Now if I hold down the mouse, I can essentially just swipe it back and forth. And this will work very similar if we wanted to do it on a tablet. Now if we wanted to do it on a tablet, we do need to change it so it's not using the mouse, but instead using the touch. Now that'll actually work just fine also on a computer with a mouse, but since we're actually doing this on a computer without a touch screen, we're just going to use the mouse instead. Okay, so let's add a couple of additional things to our game. When each of the presents gets spawned, let's go ahead and change the height and the width a little bit, just so they're not all exactly the same size. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to randomly adjust the height and the width. So let's take a look at our present, and you'll see that the size is 75 by 75. So we'll make that a little bit smaller or a little bit larger each time it creates one. So on the event sheet, right here at the very top, we're going to go ahead and add another action. We're going to click present. We're going to say set width right here. And then we're going to use the random function. So we're going to say random. So we're going to start with a number a little bit smaller. So let's say 65, and we'll go a little bit bigger, 85. And then we'll click done. Now let's also adjust the height as well. So let's go ahead and say do it again. We'll say present, and we're going to use the set height. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to say random, but this time let's actually say between 70 and 80. Remember the normal size is 75, so that'll just be a little bit higher or a little bit longer or a little bit shorter. So now what we want to do is we're going to just copy these two down here. So we can actually just hold down the control key and drag them, and it'll make a copy. You can also just type them back in down here. So let's go ahead and run that and see if our presents are a little bit wider and a little bit higher. All right, so now you can see our presents are just a little bit different shapes. Some of them are a little bit skinnier than others, some of them are a little bit wider, but they're all a little bit different. So now they're actually not going to be exactly the same, which adds a nice little effect. All right, so let's add one more thing. Let's go ahead and create a bomb that spawns randomly. And if you swipe the bomb by mistake, then you end up losing points. So let's go ahead and create that. So let's go back to our layout. We're going to create a new sprite. We're going to place it down below here. And we'll go ahead and load in our bomb image. And this is probably a little too large, so let's go ahead and scale that down. We'll make it about the same size as our present. Maybe even just a little bit bigger than our present. Make it a little bit harder. Now we'll go ahead and add physics as well because we want it to have the same behavior. All right, so the easiest way to do this is we're going to create another every X seconds, and we'll just go ahead and spawn that. So we'll go ahead and create another event, system, every X seconds, and let's go ahead and use random 5, 8. So between 5 seconds and 8 seconds. You may want to go longer, you may want to go shorter, depending on how hard you want to make it. We'll go ahead and click done. So now our action is going to be very similar. We're going to go ahead and spawn an object. So we're going to say create, and then we'll use create an object, and this is going to be our bomb. We forgot to name our bomb. Let's go ahead and name our bomb here in just a second. So we're going to also want it to be from the lower left-hand corner or right-hand corner. So for the left-hand corner, let's go ahead and say 0 for the X and 480 for the Y. And then we're going to want to do the same thing as we're going to want to apply force or an impulse. So let's go ahead and say sprite. And then we're going to scroll down here to imply apply impulse at angle. And we're going to do kind of the same thing. We'll say random, and then we'll use 25 and 45 as well. It's about the same size. And then our angle is still going to be negative 70 so that it keeps going in the same direction. And our image point is 0. All right, let's go ahead and rename that sprite as well. So we'll go ahead and call this bomb, just so that they're all named properly. Now let's go ahead and run that and see if a bomb gets created. All right, here we go. We should see a bomb show up any second. There it is. And you can see it bounces around just like all the other objects because it has physics. And there it is again. All right, so let's go ahead and tweak a few more things. We want to make sure that we don't, that if we swipe the bomb, we actually lose points. So since we didn't add that logic yet, we can't swipe it yet. All right, so now in order to create our bomb coming from the other side, let's just go ahead and copy this again. So we'll go ahead and copy, paste, and then we're just going to adjust this just like we did the other one. So we're going to say 854 for the lower right-hand corner. And then let's just change our angle to a negative 110. And so now they'll come from both sides, and it'll come randomly between every 5 and 8 seconds. Now let's go ahead and add, if we swipe the bomb, we do something like subtract points. So just like with our mouse here, we're going to do something very, very similar. So we're going to say add event, and we're going to say mouse is over object, and then we're going to pick our bomb object. Now we're going to go ahead and add another condition, and we're going to say mouse, and then we're going to say is button down, and we're going to do left button again. So it's exactly the same, only it's using the bomb. Now what we want to do is we're probably going to spawn, some particles, destroy the bomb, but then we want to subtract a score. So we'll go ahead and say bomb, spawn another object, and we'll go ahead and use the same particles, and we'll go ahead and destroy the bomb. But let's go ahead and change this here. So we'll just copy this and we'll paste this down here. So instead of adding 1 to our score, let's subtract 5 from our score. So if you swipe a bomb and you had 0, then you'll actually subtract into a negative value. So let's go ahead and click done. Now let's test this and make sure that our score actually decreases if we swipe a bomb. So we should be seeing bombs come from both sides now because we've added it in. And there they are. Okay, so you see I just swiped 1 and now I have a negative 5. So now I have to swipe 5 presents to get back to 0 without accidentally swiping a bomb. There we go. Then if I swipe a bomb again, there we go, I subtract 5. So now if we swipe a bomb, we get negative 5 points. So that's looking pretty good. I think we need a message that says, please don't swipe the bombs. Otherwise, the user isn't going to know why their score was subtracted when they swiped a bomb. So on the layout, let's go ahead and create a text. And we're going to set it off the screen right here. And we're going to set the text equal to, we're going to say, don't swipe the bomb. And now let's change the text to be red so that it really stands out. Let's see if that stands out on our background. And then let's also make the font size much larger. All right, don't swipe the bomb. All right, so that looks pretty good. So we'll go ahead and leave this off the screen. We're gonna have that show up on the screen for a few seconds if you swipe a bomb. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna name this, and we're gonna call this bomb text so that we know what the text is. Now we're also gonna use the fade behavior so that it shows up and then fades out after a few seconds so that it doesn't stay on the screen. So let's add fade. And then we're going to want to set our wait time to 2 seconds so that it'll actually wait 2 seconds before it fades out. We'll leave the other values the same. We'll do activate on start to yes, and we're going to leave the destroy after fade out on as well. And what we'll do is we'll spawn this as a new object, and then it'll go ahead and fade out and then get destroyed on its own. We don't have to keep track of it. So on our event sheet, right here where we swipe the bomb, we'll go ahead and add another action. And we're going to say bomb, and we're going to say spawn another object, and then we're going to actually spawn that text,
and we can leave it on 0 and image point 0. Now we do need to move this up above where it gets destroyed so that it'll actually get displayed before the bomb gets destroyed. The next thing that we need to do is whatever angle that bomb is when it gets destroyed, it might not be at 0. It may be rotating, in which case our text is going to get rotated, and it may even be upside down. So let's go ahead and adjust that so that our bomb text is always 0. So we use set angle, and we're just going to leave that as 0. So we'll go ahead and move this up here as well. So now it'll get spawned, and then it'll always get an angle of 0 so that it always shows correctly. And then once it fades out, it'll actually get destroyed. So let's go ahead and test that and see if it works. All right, so we'll wait for a bomb to show up, and then we'll swipe it. All right, there we go. Don't swipe the bombs. Stayed for 2 seconds, and then it faded out. So let's see if it works a second time. Perfect. Don't swipe the bomb. So it doesn't matter which bomb we select or we swipe, it'll always display that message. Perfect. Now let's also make sure that if we miss the bomb and the bomb falls down, that it doesn't fall forever. So let's catch it just like we did here with our present. So we'll go ahead and add another event, and we'll say bomb compare y, and we'll go ahead and say if it's greater than 500, and then we'll just go ahead and destroy that. So we'll say bomb destroy. So there we go. So now it won't fall forever. All right, so there's our completed game. We have a background, we have some presents that get spawned, we have a bomb that gets spawned, we've got a message that says don't swipe them, we've got some particles. We did a little bit of a trick around our score just to keep track of it without a variable. Then we went ahead and spawned our bombs and our presents and created them from each the left and the right bottom of the screen to shoot up. So there you go. Kind of a fun game. It's a very easy one to build. It's very quick. It's a little bit of a spin-off of the Fruit Ninja games, which kids love as well. So go ahead and create and spawn different objects, create some different effects, and let me know what you find out. So thanks.